She signed the contract on a Thursday morning with a borrowed pen. The conference room on the 14th floor of the Callaway building smelled of leather chairs and the specific cold air of a room where serious decisions were made by people who were comfortable making them. Nadia Reeves was not comfortable. She held the pen with the steady grip of someone who had decided 20 minutes ago in the elevator that discomfort was not a reason to stop. The man across the table waited. Silas Morrow. I am 37 years old. Dark suit, no tie, the quiet authority of someone who had stopped needing formality to communicate that the room was his. He had explained the terms once, not twice, in the same tone he would have used to read a weather forecast. 6 months. A legal marriage, documented and verifiable, tied to a succession clause in his grandfather's estate that required the eldest heir to be married before his 38th birthday or forfeit controlling interest in the Morrow Group to his uncle Philip, who had been waiting for exactly this gap for 11 years. In exchange, the complete settlement of the $412,000 in debt that had accumulated across 3 years of his late sister's cancer treatment, debt that now sat entirely in the name of Nadia's widowed father, Gerald, who had co-signed every payment plan, every extension, every arrangement because his daughter Rhea had needed him to. Rhea is gone now. The debt remained. Gerald was 63 years old with a bad heart and a payment plan that had 16 more years to run. Nadia had done the math 12 different ways. She signed. The terms are simple, Silas said. You move into the main residence on Monday. You attend functions as required. I'll give you a schedule. You maintain the appearance publicly. You stay out of my business. He looked at the signed contract without picking it up. At the end of 6 months we filed for dissolution. The debt is settled before you leave the building today. She looked at him. One condition, she said. His eyes came up. My father doesn't know the details of the arrangement, she said. He knows I'm getting married. He doesn't know why. Silas held her gaze. That's your business, he said. Not mine. Then we agree, she said. She stood. She held out her hand. He looked at it for a moment. The specific pause of someone unused to being offered a handshake in this context, or possibly unused to being offered a handshake at all. He shook it. Her grip was firm and dry. She walked to the elevator. She rode it down 14 floors. She stood in the lobby of the Callaway building with the contract copy in her bag and the debt settlement confirmation that Silas's attorney had already emailed to her phone, and she pressed her hand flat against the cool marble wall. She breathed. 6 months. She had survived 3 years of watching her best friend, Rhea, Gerald's daughter, Nadia's person since they were 7 years old at the same bus stop, fight something that couldn't be fought. She had sat in every waiting room. She had driven to every appointment. She had organized every payment plan and made every call and held Gerald's hand in the hospital corridor when the number stopped moving in the right direction. 6 months was nothing. She could do 6 months. She called her father. Dad, she said. I need to tell you something. I'm getting married on Monday. Silence. Then, Nadia. His name is Silas, she said. You'll meet him soon. He's good. She said it because it was the word she had available. She did not yet know if it was true. Monday arrived with rain. She moved into the main residence on Whitmore Street, a house that was the specific kind of large that made no noise about its size, all clean lines and warm wood and a garden visible from the kitchen that had been maintained with the same quiet precision as everything else. She arrived with 2 bags. The housekeeper, a woman named June, 61, with the particular warm assessment of someone who had managed this house for a long time and was performing an evaluation of its newest resident, showed her to a room on the 2nd floor. The room had a window that faced the garden. Nadia set her bags on the floor. She looked at the garden. She thought about Gerald and his bad heart and 16 more years of payment plans. She thought about Rhea. She pressed her hand flat against the window glass. She breathed. Dinner is at 7, June said from the doorway. Mr. Morrow usually eats in the study when he's working. I'll set the kitchen table if you prefer. The kitchen, Nadia said. Please. June nodded. She left. Nadia unpacked one bag. She left the other for later. She did not yet know that the man downstairs, the one who had read the contract terms in a conference room like a weather forecast, who had not said one unnecessary word in 40 minutes of legal proceedings, had gone to his study after she arrived and had stood at the window for a long time before sitting down. Not working. Standing. and that the thing he had been standing with was something Nadia would not discover for weeks. Something that changed the shape of what they had agreed to, in a way neither of them had yet put words to. Silas Morrow had a rule about the kitchen. Not a stated rule. A pattern, the kind that established itself through repetition without anyone deciding it on purpose. He ate in the study when he was working, which was most evenings. The kitchen was June's domain in the mornings and a functional space in the afternoons. By day 4 of the arrangement, the kitchen was also where Nadia made tea at 10 in the evening. He discovered this on day 4 because he came down for water, an ordinary, uncharged errand, and found her at the kitchen table with a notebook and a mug and the specific concentrated focus of someone in the middle of working through a problem. She looked up. Neither of them apologized for being there. "Tea," she said. He held the doorframe. "No," he said. He got his water. He went back upstairs. On day 6 he came down again and she was there again. This time he sat. Not because he had decided to. Because the study had been producing the same paragraph for 3 hours and the kitchen was warm from the oven and June had left something in a covered dish on the counter that smelled like the specific ordinary comfort of a house where someone cooked properly. He sat. She did not make conversation. She was working on something in the notebook. The pages covered in small, organized handwriting, columns of figures that he recognized as the kind of detailed accounting done by someone managing something complicated. "Accountant," he said. "Freelance bookkeeper," she said. "Mostly small businesses. 3 clients right now, looking for a 4th. He held his water glass. "You work from here?" he said. "If that's acceptable," she said. "The house has a study," he said. "You can use it during the day." She looked up from the notebook. "You're in the study during the day," she said. "The guest study," he said. "2nd floor, east wing. It's empty." He held the notebook. "Thank you," she said. He nodded. He went back upstairs. Day 11. June had a cold. Nadia discovered this at 7 in the morning when June appeared in the kitchen doorway looking precisely the way someone looked when they were too professional to call in sick but too sick to pretend effectively. "Go to bed," Nadia said. June looked at her. "Mr. Morrow's schedule." "I'll manage it today," Nadia said. "What does he need?" June listed the day's logistics in the specific compressed efficiency of someone who managed a great deal and had organized it entirely in her head. Coffee at 7:30. A call at 9 he needed to be reminded of. Lunch was usually skipped unless someone put it in front of him. The dry cleaning needed collection. Nadia wrote it down. June went back to bed. Silas came downstairs at 7:20 and found coffee already made and a note on the counter that said, "Call at 9, Patterson Re Vancouver file. I'll collect the dry cleaning this afternoon." He looked at the note. He looked at the coffee. He picked up the coffee. He went to his study. At 9:03 his phone buzzed. "Nadia from the 2nd floor guest study. Patterson is online too." He took the call. At 1:15 a plate appeared outside his study door. He opened it, looked at the plate. A proper lunch, the kind June made on the days she felt like taking care of things, and looked down the hallway. Nadia was already back in the guest study. The door was open. He could hear the sound of her typing. He ate lunch. He set the plate back outside the door. By 3 it had been collected. He did not thank her that day. He thanked her the next morning instead, briefly at the kitchen counter. "You didn't have to do that," he said. "June needed rest," she said. "It wasn't complicated." She poured her coffee. He went to the guest study. He held his cup and looked at the counter. He thought about a woman who had signed a contract to help pay a dead girl's medical bills. He thought about the way she had held the pen. Steady, no hesitation, not performing courage, just steady. He thought about the notebook with the columns of figures. He thought about the plate outside his study door. He went to his study. He had people who had worked for him for years who had never once thought to send him a reminder text at 9:03. He pressed his hand flat on the desk. He pulled up a file. He started working. And he made a note in his phone. Not for any particular reason, just because it was a fact and he organized facts. That Nadia's 3rd bookkeeping client was a bakery on the east side and she had been trying to find a 4th for 3 weeks. He closed the note. He pulled up a different file. There were a great many small businesses in the Morrow Group's orbit that needed clean, reliable bookkeeping. He had not been thinking about any of them when he opened the note. He was not going to do anything impulsive. But the note stayed open in the back of his mind all day. And there was something else he had not told Nadia about the estate clause. Something that Philip Morrow had done 6 days ago that was going to change the urgency of everything. Silas found out on day 14. His attorney, a methodical, unflappable man named Cross who communicated important information in the same voice he used for routine updates, called at 8 in the morning. Philip has retained his own attorney, Cross said. He's filed a preemptive challenge to the estate clause. Silas set down his coffee. On what grounds? He said. He's claiming the marriage doesn't meet the clause's authenticity requirements, Cross said. Specifically, he's alleging it's an arranged transaction rather than a genuine marital relationship. Silas pressed his hand flat on the desk. How does he know? He said. He doesn't know, Cross said. He's speculating. The challenge is a fishing expedition. He's looking for inconsistencies in the documentation that would support the claim. But if he gets discovery rights to the contract, he would see the terms, Silas said. Yes, Cross said. How long before the challenge is heard? Silas said. The estate's trustees will convene in approximately 8 weeks, Cross said. Philip's challenge will be presented and evaluated at that meeting. If the trustees find merit, they can void the inheritance clause entirely, Silas said. And the estate reverts to the succession terms without the marriage requirement, which would give Philip controlling interest regardless of the marriage, Cross said. Silas held the phone. What does the estate need to see between now and 8 weeks? He said. Evidence that the marriage is real, Cross said. Not documented real. Trustees are sophisticated people. If they examine you and Nadia together and find what they'd find in a genuine marriage, the challenge fails on its face. He paused. If they find what's actually there. They found a contract, Silas said. Yes, Cross said. He ended the call. He sat at his desk for a long moment. He had not told Nadia about Philip. He had not told her about the challenge. He had not told her that the 6-month arrangement she had signed had just developed a complication that made the next 8 weeks considerably more significant than he had originally designed for. He had to tell her. She was his business partner in this. The arrangement could not function without her understanding the current parameters. He went to the guest study. He knocked. She looked up from her laptop. Sit down, he said. She looked at the chair across from her desk. She looked at his face. She sat. He sat. He told her. She listened without interrupting, the same way she did everything, with the complete, focused attention of someone who filed information as it arrived and did not ask questions until the filing was done. When he finished, she held her pen. She looked at the desk. Philip, she said. He's your father's brother. My grandfather's younger son, Silas said. He's been expecting controlling interest since my grandfather's health declined. The marriage clause in the estate was specifically designed to give me the path to it. My grandfather wanted me to have the majority position. Philip has been contesting the clause since it was read. But now he has a specific mechanism, Nadia said. If he can prove the marriage is arranged rather than genuine, the mechanism disappears. Yes, Silas said. She held the pen. When the trustees examine us, she said. What do they look for? Normal evidence of a real relationship, Silas said. Things that can't be fabricated cleanly. Knowledge of each other. Shared patterns. The way people behave together when they're not performing. She held the pen. We're already not performing, she said. We're not performing warmth. We're just living in the same house. He held the chair. That's the honest assessment, he said. The trustees would find 2 people who are polite to each other and have a scheduling system, she said. Yes, he said. She held the pen. She looked at the desk. What do you need from me for the next 8 weeks, she said. The direct version of the question. He held the chair. He pressed his hands flat on his knees. I need us to be believable, he said. Not performed. Not constructed. Believable. He held her gaze. I need to know you. Actually, I know you. And I need you to actually know me. She held the pen. That's a more significant requirement than the original terms, she said. Yes, he said. You should have told me about Philip before I signed, she said. Not accusatory. Just placing a fact. He held her gaze. I didn't know he'd move this quickly, he said. He was expected to challenge eventually. Not in the first 2 weeks. She held the pen. She held it and looked at the desk. She looked at him. "I'm not walking away from this," she said. "My father's debt is settled. I'm not undoing that because the terms became more complicated." She held the pen. "But I need to understand the full picture from this point forward. Every time something changes, you tell me." He held her gaze. "Yes," he said. "Everything," she said. "Everything," he said. She nodded. She set the pen down. She looked at the laptop. She looked back at him. "What do you actually do on Sunday mornings?" she said. He blinked. "What?" he said. "If we're going to actually know each other," she said, "we start with Sunday mornings. What do you do?" He held the chair. He held it and looked at her. This woman who had signed a contract with a borrowed pen and moved in with 2 bags and managed his house for a sick housekeeper and was now asking about his Sunday mornings with the focused practicality of someone who understood that the only way through was forward. "I run," he said. "Early. And then I read. And then I drink too much coffee and work until June makes me eat." She held the desk. She looked at him. "I run too," she said. "Early." He held the chair. "Tomorrow," he said. 6:15. She looked at her laptop. She looked at him. 6:15, she said. They ran without talking. This was not awkward. It was the specific comfortable silence of 2 people who had independently discovered that running was an activity that required nothing from the mind except the next step. Silas ran fast. Nadia kept pace. He noticed this on the 3rd morning and said nothing about it because it did not require commentary. On the 5th morning he took a different route, longer through the park on Ashford, the one that opened early and had a view of the river at the back corner where the path curved. She followed without asking where they were going. At the curve in the path with the river visible below in the specific low November light he stopped. She stopped beside him. They looked at the river. "Ria used to run here," Nadia said. Quietly. The kind of thing said when a place triggers a memory before you've decided to share it. He looked at her. She held the view. "She was Gerald's daughter," Nadia said. "My father's. She was also my best friend from the time we were 7. She held the view. "I know that's not a common combination. It just was what it was." "When did she die?" he said. 14 months ago, Nadia said. "March." The treatment had stopped working in January and we knew the timeline and she still wanted to run until February. She looked at the river. "Not here specifically. Near Gerald's house. But at the same time in the morning." He held the view. "The debt," he said. 3 years of fighting," she said. "Gerald co-signed everything because Ria asked him to and he would have done anything she asked." She held the view. "When she died the debt was just there. Sitting in his name. 16 more years on the payment plan. His heart isn't good and 16 more years felt like a sentence." He pressed his hands into his jacket pockets. "You were paying it with her?" he said. "During the 3 years." "As much as I could," she said. "I'm a freelance bookkeeper." As much as I could was not much. He held the view. He looked at the river. "The contract," he said. "When my attorney's referral service reached out to you, what was your first reaction?" She looked at the river. "I didn't believe it was real," she said. "I thought it was a scam. I spent 2 hours verifying it before I called back." She held the view. "And then I verified it again after I called back. And then I verified it a 3rd time the morning of the meeting." He held the view. "What convinced you?" he said. "The specificity," she said. "Scams are vague. The terms were very specific. The debt amount was exact. The timeline was exact." She looked at him. "Specific things are usually real." He held the view. "Tell me about your grandfather," she said. He pressed his hands into his pockets. He looked at the river. "He built the Morrow Group from a single import contract in 1971, he said. He spent 30 years making it significant. He was also difficult." He held the view. "He was the kind of man who loved you in the specific way of someone who had to control the shape of the love." He pressed his lips together. "The estate clause. The marriage requirement. It was his way of engineering my life even after he died." "You resent it," she said. "I understand it," he said. "That's different." She looked at him. "Do you think he would have chosen this?" she said. "This specific arrangement. If he could see it." Silas held the view. He held it for a long moment. No, he said. He actually wanted me married. With someone who would last. He pressed his lips together. He didn't trust Philip to run what he built. He didn't trust me to choose the right kind of life on my own. The clause was his way of forcing both issues simultaneously. Nadia held the view. He sounds exhausting, she said. The corner of Silas's mouth moved. Just slightly. He said. She held the view. Silas, she said. He waited. I need to ask you something and I need the real answer, she said. Ask, he said. The clause, she said. The marriage requirement. Is there a reason he wrote it specifically for a marriage rather than just a stable personal relationship? Why did the legal form matter to him? Silas held the view. He pressed his lips together. His wife, he said. My grandmother. She left him when my father was 8. Not because the marriage was bad, because she wanted a different life and she chose it. He held the view. He spent the rest of his life believing that the specific legal commitment was the thing that held people in place when they wanted to leave. Nadia held the river view. He thought commitment was about containment, she said. Yes, Silas said. And you, she said. Do you think that? He held the view. He turned to look at her. I think, he said carefully, that the only commitment worth having is one where the other person has a genuine choice and chooses to stay. She held the view. She looked at him. And here, right here in the middle of this story, we have to stop. Because this is the question at the center of everything. Have you ever been in something that started as a transaction and slowly, without announcement, became something else entirely? Something that made you realize that what you thought were terms were actually the beginning of something that didn't have terms? Tell us in the comments. Because what Nadia is about to discover, what is already happening whether either of them has named it, is what that shift looks like from the inside. They ran back to the house in silence. The same easy silence as always. But different. Something had moved in it. And 3 days later, Nadia found something in the Morrow Group's files that told her the challenge from Philip was not just a legal maneuver. It was personal. And it was designed to hurt someone other than Silas. She found it by accident. Silas had asked her to reconcile a set of foundation accounts. The Morrow Family Charitable Foundation, which ran alongside the main group and required clean annual documentation for its tax filings. It was the kind of work she did in her sleep, and he had offered it as a paid consulting arrangement that was separate from the estate terms, which she had accepted with the specific clear-eyed practicality she brought to all professional matters. She was 2 hours into the foundation's receivables when she found the name. Gerald Reeves. Listed as a former grantee of the Morrow Foundation. 3 years ago. A small educational grant, not significant in the context of the foundation's overall giving. She looked at the name. She looked at the date. 3 years ago was the 2nd year of Ria's treatment. She pulled the grant file. The grant was for an educational trust. A fund designed to support children of recipients during periods of family hardship. It had been applied for in Gerald's name. The application had been reviewed and declined. Declined on a technicality. Insufficient supporting documentation. She looked at the reviewer's signature. Philip Morrow. She held the desk. Philip Morrow had declined a grant application from Gerald Reeves, her father, 3 years ago, during the hardest period of Ria's illness. She pulled Philip's file from the foundation's governance records. He had been the foundation's administrative director for 9 years. He had discretionary authority over grant decisions below a certain threshold. The grant Gerald had applied for was below that threshold. Philip had declined it alone without review. She looked at the date of the decline. She looked at the date of the first large hospital payment plan that had accumulated Gerald's debt. One was the week before the other. If the grant had been approved, if Gerald had received what he had applied for, the debt would not have compounded the way it had. The payment plan would have been manageable. The 16-year sentence would not exist. Philip had known who Gerald was. He was certain of it. She sat at the desk very still. Philip had been watching Silas for years. Watching for anything connected to the estate. Looking for leverage, for information, for ways to position himself favorably when the clause came into play. Gerald's application had come through the foundation. Philip had seen it. He had looked at the name. He had declined the grant not because of insufficient documentation but because Gerald Reeves was the father of Ria Reeves, And Rhea Reeves had been, in the last year of her life during her treatment, in a relationship with someone who worked in Silas's organization. A relationship that had ended before Rhea died. A relationship Nadia had known about and Silas had not. Philip had declined the grant to create financial pressure. Not on Gerald specifically. On the chain of people around him. Hoping the pressure would eventually produce information, leverage, something useful. It had not produced information. It had produced a debt. And the debt had produced Nadia. Nadia, who was now sitting in the guest study of Silas's house on Whitmore Street on day 42 of a 6-month arrangement, understanding for the first time that the specific shape of her life, the contract, the terms, the borrowed pen, had been created at least partially by a deliberate act of cruelty from the man who was currently challenging the arrangement in a state court. Her hands on the desk went very still. She picked up her phone. She called Cross. "I'm sorry," she said when he answered. "You're Silas's attorney. I understand that. But I need to tell you something and I need it to reach Silas before tonight." Cross listened. He called Silas at 12:42. Silas came to the guest study at 1. He knocked. She had the files open on the desk, printed, organized, the pattern clearly visible in the documentation she had pulled and arranged with the precise column-based clarity of someone who organized things for a living. He sat. He read. She watched his face. His face was the face of a man who had learned to manage his reactions in rooms where reacting had consequences. He managed it for approximately 45 seconds. Then his jaw tightened. His hands, flat on the desk, pressed harder. "He knew who Gerald was," Silas said. "He had the application in front of him with Gerald's name and address," Nadia said. Gerald's address matched a neighborhood Philip would have known was connected to the foundation community from a previous year's grant cycle. He ran the connection. "And he declined the grant," Silas said. "On a documentation technicality that he had discretionary authority over," Nadia said. "He could have asked for additional documentation. That's standard practice for borderline applications. He declined instead." Silas held the desk. "He was watching for anything connected to me," he said. "He saw Gerald's application and declined it to create a pressure point in my orbit." "He couldn't have known it would lead to this," Nadia said. "That was 3 years ago. The arrangement we have now, he couldn't have anticipated it." "No," Silas said. "But he created the conditions." He pressed both hands flat on the desk. He breathed once. He looked at the files. "The Foundation Board," he said. "Do they have oversight authority over Philip's past grant decisions?" "The board has full retroactive review authority," Nadia said. "It's in the Foundation's governance charter. Any board member can request a review of a decision made under discretionary authority if there's evidence of improper motivation." "Evidence," Silas said. "The pattern is documentable," she said. "The timing, the connection, the specific application of the technicality that wasn't applied to comparable applications in the same cycle." She held the desk. "I'm a bookkeeper, Silas. I can see the pattern in 60 seconds. The board's independent auditor will see it in 30. He held the desk. He held it with both hands. "He's going to lose his position on the foundation," he said. Quiet. "Processing." "Yes," she said. "And the estate challenge," he said. "If the trustees see documented evidence that Philip has been systematically targeting people in my orbit for leverage, the challenge loses credibility entirely," she said. "A man who declined a grant to create pressure on someone connected to his estate rival does not have standing to challenge the authenticity of that rival's marriage." Silas held the desk. He looked at Nadia. He looked at this woman who had come to work on foundation accounts because she was a competent bookkeeper and had found in 60 minutes the thing that had been sitting in the foundation's files for 3 years. "Nadia," he said. She held his gaze. "Why are you telling me this?" he said. "The debt is already settled. You're not getting more from this." She held his gaze. "Because it's what happened to my father," she said. "Gerald. Because someone did something cruel to him and it should be on the record." She held the desk. "That's the only reason." He held her gaze. He pressed his hands flat. "Then we put it on the record," he said. The board met on a Thursday. Silas had requested an emergency session. the specific formal language of a board request that could not be deferred without creating its own documentary problem. The foundation had 7 board members. All 7 were present via video conference. Nadia had prepared the documentation package, 43 pages tabbed and cross-referenced, the kind of organized precision that made a clear argument without requiring the reader to do work. She sat in the conference room beside Cross. Silas sat at the head of the table. Philip Morrow attended via video from his office. Nadia looked at the screen. She had not seen Philip before this. 62 years old. Silver-haired. The composed bearing of a man who had spent 11 years being professionally patient and had not yet received information that required him to be anything else. He looked at the conference room. He looked at Nadia. His expression did not change. But his eyes moved across her face with the specific, assessing quality of someone running a rapid identification. Cross presented the documentation. He did it in 14 minutes. The timeline of Gerald's application, the comparable applications from the same grant cycle that received different treatment, the specific documentation technicality cited in the decline, the pattern of Philip's grant decisions in years where the applicants had demonstrable connections to Silas's professional or personal orbit. The board asked 4 questions. Philip answered the first 2 with managed composure. On the third, his composure showed its first crack. A pause slightly longer than it should have been, a recalibration visible to anyone in the room who was watching for it. Nadia was watching for it. The 4th question was from the board chair. A woman named Isabel who had been on the foundation board for 12 years and had the particular, precise patience of someone who had heard many versions of the truth and could identify the real one by what it omitted. Mr. Morrow, Isabel said. The application from Gerald Reeves, submitted 3 years ago, was declined citing document deficiency. Our records show that 2 applications in the same grant cycle with comparable documentation were approved. Can you walk us through the distinction? Philip held the camera. He held it for 3 seconds. The applications were evaluated on individual merit, he said. I don't have the individual files in front of me to compare. I have them, Isabel said. I'm looking at all 3 now. Pause. The documentation presented by Mr. Reeves is comparable to the 2 approved applications on every substantive criterion. The cited deficiency, a formatting issue in the supporting letter, was waived in one of the approved applications from the same cycle. Philip was quiet. Mr. Morrow, Isabel said. I'd like you to explain the distinction. Another pause. Longer this time. I may have applied the standard inconsistently, Philip said. I can review the file. The board has already reviewed the file, Isabel said. We have also reviewed 6 other declined applications over the past 8 years where the applicants had documented professional or personal connections to Silas Morrow. All 6 were declined under circumstances that did not consistently reflect stated foundation criteria. She paused. This pattern raises concerns about the use of your discretionary authority for purposes other than the foundation's grant mission. Philip's composure completed its collapse. Not dramatically, just the specific visible process of a man who had been certain of his position for 11 years and was discovering that certainty had an expiration date. I would like to have my attorney present for any further, he began. Of course, Isabel said. The board is suspending your administrative authority pending a full review. We'll schedule the formal proceeding with appropriate notice. She paused. Thank you for attending today. The screen went dark. Cross received the estate challenge notification at 4 that afternoon. Withdrawn. Philip's attorney had filed the withdrawal at 3:47, before the board session had even concluded. Cross called Silas. The challenge is withdrawn, he said. Completely and without reservation. Silas held the phone. He was at the kitchen table. Nadia was across from him with tea she had made while they waited. He set the phone face down on the table. Withdrawn, he said. She held her cup. She held it with both hands. Before the trustees convene, she said. Yes, he said. He couldn't let the full estate review happen now. Not with the foundation documentation in the record. She held the cup. She looked at the table. Gerald, she said. If the foundation reviews the declined applications, the review will likely result in a remedial grant, Silas said, to applicants whose declines were found to be improperly motivated. He held the table. Cross is preparing a submission on Gerald's behalf. It would cover the original grant amount with interest. Nadia's hands tightened on the cup. She looked at the table. She pressed her lips together. She did not say anything for a long moment. You don't have to do that, she said. That's not what this arrangement is. It's what the foundation is required to do when it finds an improper denial, Silas said. It's not a favor. It's a correction. She held the cup. Her chin moved once. He held it still. He's going to ask me why, she said. Gerald. He's going to ask why he's receiving a grant from a foundation now, when the application was 3 years ago. Tell him it was under review, Silas said. Tell him administrative decisions sometimes take time to be properly reconsidered. She held the cup. She looked at him. That's not quite the truth, she said. It's the shape of the truth, he said. The substance is accurate. She held the cup. She held it and looked at him. At this man who had read the contract terms like a weather forecast and had not said one unnecessary word in 40 minutes of legal proceedings and had been standing at the study window for a long time on the day she arrived. She held the cup. Day 44, she said. He held the table. Yes, he said. 136 days left, she said. He held the table. He pressed both hands flat. He said nothing. Neither did she. The kitchen was warm. The tea was going cold. Neither of them touched it. Gerald came to the house on a Saturday in December. He arrived by taxi. His driving had become unreliable after the cardiac event 2 years ago, and he managed this with the specific, dignified practicality of a man who adapted to limitations without performing either acceptance or protest. He was 63 years old and he looked like Ria in the way that parents looked like their children after a certain age. The specific echo of a face you loved in a face that had survived it. Nadia had not warned Silas that her father looked like Ria. She had not thought of it in time. Silas opened the door. He looked at Gerald. His face held. The controlled management of a man who was good at his face. And then just for a moment something passed through it. Gerald noticed. You knew her, Gerald said. Not a question. Silas held the door. Briefly, he said. From work. He stopped. He held the door. She was remarkable. Gerald looked at him. He nodded. Yes, he said. She was. He came inside. June had made a proper Saturday lunch. The kind that required the dining room table and the good plates, which June had insisted on and Nadia had not argued with because some things were worth the formality. They sat. Gerald held his napkin in his lap with the habit of someone who had been raised to observe table manners and had observed them for 63 years without requiring a reason. He looked at Nadia. He looked at Silas. He looked around the house. The clean lines, the garden visible through the dining room window, the specific warmth of a house where someone lived with intention. She's been happy here, Gerald said to Silas. Not asking. Telling. Silas held the table. Has she told you that? He said. She doesn't have to tell me, Gerald said. She sounds different on the phone. She sounds like a person who is sleeping properly. He looked at Nadia. When was the last time you slept properly before this? Dad, she said. 3 years ago, he said. At least. He held his napkin. She doesn't rest. She manages. There's a difference and she's always known the difference and chosen the management anyway. He looked at Silas. She's resting now. Silas held the table. He pressed his hands flat on it. He looked at Nadia. She was looking at her plate. Her face had the specific quality of someone receiving something that was both wanted and difficult to receive. Gerald, Silas said. Gerald looked at him. The foundation grant, Silas said. The one you'll be receiving. I want you to know it's coming because you were right to apply 3 years ago and the decision was handled incorrectly. He held the table. It should have come then. I'm sorry it didn't. Gerald held his napkin. He looked at Silas. He looked at Nadia. He pressed his lips together. The debt, he said. Quiet. The flat, unsentimental acknowledgement of a man who had been carrying something heavy for a long time. Yes, Silas said. Gerald held his napkin. He looked at the table. He looked at Nadia again. You did something, he said. You and this man. Together. You did something for me. The foundation corrected its own error, Nadia said. Nadia, Gerald said. She looked at her father. Thank you, he said. Both of you. The dining room was quiet. Outside the window, December had settled into the garden. June had left the good plates and gone somewhere tactfully elsewhere. After lunch, Gerald walked in the garden with Silas. Nadia watched from the dining room window, her father and her husband side by side, moving through the December garden with the unhurried gait of two people who had found something unexpected to talk about. She held the windowsill. She breathed. She thought about day 44, when they had sat at the kitchen table with cooling tea and neither of them had said what the silence contained. She thought about day 103, the morning Silas had come to the kitchen before the run, still in his jacket from the night before because he had worked until 6, and she had made coffee without asking and handed it to him and he had held the cup for a moment before saying, "You don't have to do that." And she had said, "I know." And neither of them had addressed what that meant. She held the windowsill. She watched her father laugh at something Silas said. She pressed her hand flat against the glass. Day 148. 31 days left. She pressed her hand against the glass and she breathed and she understood finally what she had been not quite knowing for weeks. Day 179. The annulment paperwork was on the study desk. Silas had placed it there the previous evening. The documents his attorney had prepared, the signatures required on 3 pages, the clean legal conclusion to the terms they had agreed to in a conference room on a Thursday morning. He had placed it on the desk. He had not signed it. He went for the run alone. She was not in the kitchen when he came back. He poured coffee. He stood at the counter. June appeared in the doorway, looked at the coffee, looked at him and went back to the laundry room without commenting. He carried the coffee to the study. He looked at the papers. He picked up the pen. A knock. He turned. Nadia was in the doorway. She had clearly also been for a run, later than usual separately. Her coat was still on. Her hair was slightly damp from the cold. She looked at the papers on the desk. She looked at the pen in his hand. "Silas," she said. He held the pen. "I don't want to leave," she said. The pen went still. He looked at her. He looked at her face. The direct, composed face of a woman who had signed a contract with a borrowed pen and managed his household for a sick housekeeper and found 3 years of documented cruelty in 43 pages of foundation records and had never once performed anything she did not mean. She meant this. He set the pen on the desk. He did not pick it up again. "The terms," he said. Quiet. Not the weather forecast voice. Something underneath that. "Were never the point," she said. "I don't think either of us understood that at the beginning. But somewhere between day 6 and today," she held the doorframe. "The terms stopped being what this was." He held the desk. "Nadia," he said. She waited. "I went to Gerald's application 3 years ago," he said. "After you found it. I looked at the date and I looked at the decision and I asked myself, if the grant had been approved, would you be standing in this doorway right now?" She held the doorframe. "No," she said. "No," he said. "You would have had no reason to sign the contract. Gerald would have had a grant. The debt would have been manageable." She held the doorframe. "So Philip's cruelty produced this," she said. "Yes," he said. She held the doorframe. She looked at him. "I've been angry about that," she said. "And also, not." She held the frame. Both at once. He held the desk. He pressed both hands flat. He looked at the papers. He looked at her. "Stay," he said. "Not a term. Not an arrangement. Just the word." She held the doorframe. The corner of her mouth moved. Not quite a smile. The specific movement of someone receiving something they had been careful not to want too directly. "I'll need a better study arrangement," she said. "The guest study is too small." He held the desk. "We can negotiate," he said. "I'll want my own bookkeeping clients," she said. "The Morrow Group accounts aren't enough." "Agreed," he said. "And Gerald comes to lunch on Saturdays," she said. "I'll tell June to use the good plates," he said. She held the doorframe. She held it and looked at him, and for the first time in 179 days, neither of them managed anything at all. This is what this story is really about. Not the contract or the estate clause or Philip's challenge or 43 pages of foundation documentation. It is about a borrowed pen. About a woman who signed something she needed to sign and arrived with 2 bags and a notebook full of small, organized handwriting and managed a sick housekeeper's morning without being asked. About a man who had not told her everything and then, when the terms became more complicated, told her everything. About two people who ran at 6:15 in the morning without talking because talking wasn't the point. And about what happened on day 179 when one of them stood in a doorway and said a true thing out loud instead of managing it quietly for one more day. Before you go, we want to ask you something real. Have you ever been in something that started as one thing and slowly, without a single announcement, became something else entirely? Have you ever reached a day, a specific numbered day, a morning, a doorway moment, when you finally said the true thing out loud instead of carrying it one more hour? Tell us in the comments. We have a community from all over the world, from New York to Texas, from the Pacific Coast to the Deep South, from the UK to Canada to Australia. And every comment tells us something real about the moment when terms became the wrong word for what was actually happening. If this story moved you today, share it with someone who is standing in a doorway right now, holding the true thing, deciding whether to say it. Tell them, say it. The terms were never the point. We'll see you in the next story. Stay kind.